So much was learned today with the cast of Avengers Doomsday. The James Bond franchise has new leaders, and it's something to discuss. Snow White takes a complete dive at the box office, and while Apple and Snow White, is it the same story? That's the same story, right? Anyway, and while Apple has renewed Severance, their streaming service loses money. All that and more coming up right after this. Welcome to Multiverse News, your source for information about all your favorite fictional universes. My name's Matthew Carroll, and with me on the panel today, we have J. Scotty St. Clair. What's happening, J. Scotty?
Hey, for the benefit of our audio listeners, I want to paint a picture for you. Imagine an empty director's chair that swivels around to reveal the name J. Scotty St. Clair, and that's your intro to Multiverse News. What's up?
Well, but it lingers on another name for like 30 minutes before it does that.
Yeah.
And then...
There's a build-up with ominous music in the background for a long time.
And we have Haley Hobbs. What's going on, Haley?
I took the bite of the apple of Doomsday today. It's very exciting.
Ooh.
We're going to talk about it.
Apple of Doomsday. And Jay Sisson.
Yeah, happy to be here. I'm also happy that Kevin Feige heard our recommendation that he release his news when we do our shows. Now, he tried to get out of the... I'm not sure if he listened to us, though, or if we just happened to outthink him. Because if we had done this show on our normal time of last night, we would all be very furious right now because of the news announcement that happened today, the 5-hour live stream that announced the cast of Avengers Doomsday. But, we're here and ready to talk about it.
That we are.
Gotcha, Kevin.
Gotcha.
Bob and weaving. You throw a juke, we got you. Those are boxing terms, right?
I mean, juke, not really. Not really.
No? Okay.
But bob and weave, I guess.
Okay.
You're getting close.
All right, we got a 5-star review from TJ Stafford. Our old friend TJ Stafford says, Tuesday nights have become one of my favorite nights because I can log on and hear the news that matters to me and chat with a like-minded community. Don't ever doubt the impact the work you all do can have on some of us. Keep up the great work, and you will always have a loyal audience. Stay classy. Thank you, TJ.
One of our classiest pandas.
One of them.
Yeah.
Tuesday nights, Wednesday nights, Thursday nights. We're just keeping Kevin on his toes.
Mm-hmm.
We'll reveal all the classiest listener rankings.
That's right.
13 minutes between
our
each
group
one.
chat.
It'll take 5 hours.
Yeah. All right, well, we've been talking about it this entire time, so let's just dive right into it. Today, Marvel held a 5.5-hour-long casting announcement live stream. 26 cast members were announced painstakingly, slowly, and wordlessly via the backs of chairs, and it all ended with Robert Downey Jr. himself in person strolling in and shushing the viewer. Also, in an interview this week, Scarlet Witch herself, Elizabeth Olsen, claims Wanda will not be returning for either of the Avengers films. Which of these announced cast members or unannounced cast members has us most intrigued?
Yeah, I mean, 5 hours after starting play on this thing, we finally wrapped it together as a world, and I think people had a lot of reactions to it, and a lot of people were like, why is this so long? And at the end of the day, I kind of thought it was kind of fun. I mean, I know 5 hours is a long time, but I think all of us here are like-minded in that we kind of like stuff like this, like long, drawn-out sort of marketing stunts that try to put something out there, so I thought it was kind of fun, and it definitely worked. I mean, there was a lot of conversation all day. The lead story on all of the trades was just an updating list all day. All of the trending topics on Twitter had to do with Avengers all day.
Yep.
And it was it seemed to do its job, which was be in the conversation and bring a lot of people into the conversation that like the X-Men and like the MCU stuff, and really just kind of bring a lot of different fans of things together in a conversation online, and it seemed to accomplish its goal, I think. And so, yeah, we saw the old X-Men, we saw the Ian McKellens and the Patrick Stewarts, and then we saw the cast of Thunderbolts and the cast of Fantastic Four, and we saw Tom Hiddleston, and we saw Chris Hemsworth, and just a lot of names were thrown at us. I walked away from the presentation definitely excited. I think it is an exciting move to especially see a lot of people that we didn't know were in this movie today. I mean, we could make assumptions, but all of the Fox X-Men stuff, that was new information. Like the Hemsworth and Tom Hiddleston, all of that was new information. So there was a lot of new information here. But I did walk away too wondering about the people who weren't here, like what chairs were not represented. And there are a lot of them. And I'll read off some of the ones that I took note of. And then again, I don't see this as like a criticism. I see this more of like this can kind of tell us where the story is going type thing. But real quick, I wrote down Mark Ruffalo, Iman Vellani, Brie Larson, Tatiana Maslany, Jeremy Renner, Paul Bettany, Chris Pratt, Benedict Cumberbatch, Haley Steinfeld, Samuel L. Jackson, Don Cheadle, Catherine Newton, Joe Locke, Elizabeth Olsen, any of the Eternals. I'm not going to write all their names down. Tom Holland, Ryan Reynolds, Hugh Jackman, Teyonah Parris, Dominique Thorne, and Jotil Gomez. And of course, there's a lot of smaller characters in there too. But one of the patterns that I'm noticing here is a lot of those names were Young Avengers characters. You know, you have your Miss Marvel, and you have your like Kate Bishop, I forgot her name for a second, and America Chavez and Wiccan and all these characters. And I think when I see that, I'm kind of reminded, all right, maybe that's a victim of just storytelling here, right? Like maybe we're not seeing these names on the back of the chairs, which would push this thing to 40 names or whatever, because maybe we will see a little bit of a split up of characters. We'll see some of these characters in Doomsday, and then we'll see some of these characters team up in Secret Wars to usher in the next phase of the story, whatever that may be. So I think it's a little bit of a clue maybe as to where the story's going. And then it should also be said that the Hollywood Reporter did put out an article about this today. And in the article, and this is a quote, it says, sources say that even with 26 actors announced, Marvel wasn't done with revealing the entire cast, although when and how another unveiling would occur was unclear. So at the end of the day, it's like, are they going to do this again? Probably not, but will they just trickle other characters in? We're just not really sure. But it doesn't seem like this is the full cast by any stretch of the imagination. Even though it is super impressive as it is, there's apparently more to come in some form, if it's in Secret Wars, if it's in Doomsday, or whatever.
I guess I will start by addressing the hippopotamus in the room. And if you don't get that reference, you got to join the Patreon so you can get access to the live stream. Then you'll get that joke. But in the wake of the reactions to this marketing stunt, I've seen a lot of people start to use the abbreviation DD for Doomsday. And I'm sorry, but that's just not going to work. When we have Daredevil airing concurrently, it gets real confusing really fast for me. So we have to move away from that. If we want to do ADD, I can rock with that. But DD's not going to work. So
it's called Doom or something.
Doomsday, one word too. It's one word.
Yeah. It doesn't really need an abbreviation. That's fair. But I'm going to hone in on the Thunderbolts there, and I wonder, with the choice to reveal this information now, does it build hype for Thunderbolts, which I think it certainly does, but does it potentially spoil it by us learning that so many of these characters are going to be popping up in Doomsday? And I found myself kind of somewhere in the middle. I think this might be intentional misdirecting that kind of does the best of both worlds. It can build hype and excitement for Thunderbolts, but also kind of do what we've been asking for, like lie to us. Get me thinking certain things are going to happen in this movie. Make me think that people are safe. So when they do bite the bullet, it's really going to have some impact and hurt. So all of this is conjecture, but I'm very hopeful and optimistic that Marvel has been paying attention to everything and the comments from the fans and just kind of the perspective on Marvel as a whole. And I think, or my hope is that they are responding in kind and doing things that set us up for big reveals in the theaters. So, Jay, you honed in on some of the characters that aren't appearing, and that was noteworthy to me too. The connection that I made, though, is very few of the characters that were confirmed showed up in the leaked concept art that we talked about a couple of weeks ago. And we were fairly confident that that was legit concept art, so I won't talk about the characters specifically, but I did find it very interesting that none of, like, one or two of those, maybe three or four at the most, of those characters that showed up in that concept art ended up being confirmed via this reveal here. So I don't know if that's revealing or if that's just a way of, trying to create some extra doubt around those pieces of concept art, because they've maintained, like the Russos have come out and said that wasn't concept art from these movies, but I think we know better. So In terms of the names that got the biggest like reaction out of me, the first one was Channing Tatum, and that was an instance of like giving me pause. And I was like, ugh, this is the first name that kind of has me gritting my teeth a little bit. It's like that joke worked really well in Deadpool and Wolverine. But to do anything past that just feels misguided to me, unless, like I think I said it previously, but if you bring him in for a second and kill him off unceremoniously, I'm cool with that. But anything past that, I think is not a good move, because that was the joke. He never was a character, and so this was his chance to be that kind of laughable character. So the other name that resounded with me was Tenoch Huerta as Namor, because this is the first time we've heard anything about Namor since Wakanda Forever. But I think it makes a lot of sense with Sue Storm being a part of the proceedings, and we know that Vanessa Kirby, she was one of the first names announced for Doomsday, and we know that Fantastic Four is going to be focusing on her character very heavily. I don't think there's a way that they don't broach the romance that we've seen in the comics between Namor and Sue Storm, so I'm certainly excited for that.
I will jump into what you were saying about Thunderbolts. I agree. It's tough because I just want to believe they're lying to me. Like, that's what I want to believe. But because there were a number of names that made me mad that were announced, and that was the Thunderbolts, because it makes me, like, I really believe going into Thunderbolts that is a team that could all die, and that adds stakes to that movie. And maybe they're lying to us, but the way this was done with such fanfare and like this long 5.5 hour thing and this new kind of original way of announcing this, it just feels like something we're going to look back on. And if, a third of it is lies, it'll feel weird. It just seems like they don't normally directly lie to us like that. They just don't have to tell us everything, so that made me mad. And the other name that made me mad is Tom Hiddleston, because if Tom Hiddleston is to show up as God of Stories Loki, I don't want to know. I'm just like, so many things I don't want to know about Doomsday, and I'm already at that point where like you could not market this movie at all, and I will be there, and the movie will be better for me if I know less. And Tom Hiddleston is one of those names that I obviously want to be there, but where they left his character, I was really unsure if they'd ever bring him back. And it would feel really good if they did, especially if it was a surprise. So those names really made me mad because it feels like it's undercutting Thunderbolts. It's kind of ruining the surprise of things that might happen in Doomsday. It's part of the rollout. We're going to be learning bits of information and piecing this movie together over the next year. And I don't really want to. I don't want to know. I wish they'd just hold back just enough key things that I can maintain surprise in the theater. And Tom Hiddleston, to me, was one of those prime things that I've always not wanted to know. And if it's true, if this is legit, which is straight from Marvel Studios, I'm assuming it is, we already know.
I was lucky to just be sitting at my desk when I saw the live notification come on from Twitter. And I don't usually click on lives, but it was Marvel Studios, and I was like, what is this? And it was kind of interesting to watch it from the very beginning, because you have a person walking into this hangar, which is what that was. And like, it looked like an alien scene, like from an alien movie, because it's just their silhouette. You can't see them at first. And I was like, is this a scroll? And then it wasn't. It was just a person carrying a chair. But when they set it down and it was Chris Hemsworth's name, I was like, oh my God, like what a great way to start it off. One of the original 6. One of the big 3, someone we didn't know when they'd be coming back to the MCU. It's like, did we ever think Chris Hemsworth wasn't going to come back to the MCU? Probably not.
Not after Furiosa. Sorry.
In what manner? Who knew, right? And so I thought that was a banger way to start it off. And then when it just kept going, and I was like, well, I have a lunch meeting, so I have to leave. I was like, I'll catch it later. And then it was still going when I got back. I was like, what is happening? Super fun. I thought the biggest surprise for me was Rebecca Romijn coming back as Mystique, apparently from the X-Men movies. Like that's a long straw to pull out of the pack. So I was excited about that, but I have a different take. I'm not somebody for whom spoilers is a huge problem. I know that that's very subjective, and some people really hate them, and I get that. I'm also a Star Wars fan, and Star Wars fans are used to like getting stories where you know what's going to happen, but it's about the journey, not the ending kind of a thing. And so I think sometimes that plays into my love for different storytelling, but I just keep going back to what are they holding back? Because you just got to know. We're going to get some big surprise. And I think about Elizabeth Olsen. We were like, how funny would it be if one of these chairs had her name on it and then it didn't? And I was like, And then Benedict Cumberbatch and even Charlize Theron as Clea. Those are two big ones that we need in these movies. And we know they're going to, at least, Cumberbatch said he'll be in there after he said he wasn't. And Kevin Feige was like, no, you are. So it's just like... Yeah, it can be a little disappointing to get some known things, but what is unknown? Because there's going to be something majorly unknown that wows us in the theater. I have to hope.
Yeah, well, we've seen actors talk about this, a few of them, and like you mentioned a couple of them just now. So like Benedict Cumberbatch, for example, like, oh yeah, I'm not in it, but then I'm in the second one, but then actually I'm in both or whatever, and kind of being back and forth. So it was clear to me that I don't think he was trying to misdirect us on purpose. We talked about this when it happened. I think he literally didn't really know. He just knew that there was Avengers things coming up. And then same with Paul Rudd. Like Paul Rudd came out, I think it was earlier this week. Somebody asked him about being in these movies, and he was like, well, you can just tell the Russos that they have my number or something along those lines. And then one of those chairs today had his name on it. So you've got something like that too. I actually kind of believe Elizabeth Olsen. If you want to look at the exact quote, it was an interview in the Hollywood Reporter. She was talking about a movie called The Assessment coming up that she's in, and she was asked. And I will say, I don't think the headline writers, I don't think really captured exactly what she was saying. A lot of the headlines said Elizabeth Olsen confirms not in Avengers, but if you look at the actual interview, she says something to the effect of, they're like, oh yeah, you just wrapped up shooting this thing in London. Are the Russos going to extend your stay? And she was like, oh no, I'm back in the United States. I'm working on a pilot. I'm not in London. I'm not going to be in London for a while. It was kind of one of those things. Like she didn't just say like, absolutely not, I'll never be in that movie, as kind of like what the headline sort of said. So again, it's kind of, it's kind of like, how do you want to take what she's saying? She's obviously not confirming it. She's not trying to get around it though either. But I also think back to a lot of things that she said. She's been a little back and forth. She's been a little bit like, I want to move on from that, but then I also love it. But then I also want to do other things that don't have to do with Marvel. But then I also kind of like working with the people. It's kind of always been a little back and forth with her. So I'm kind of the mind that if she's in these movies, I don't think that she'll be a central or focal character. I think we would have seen her name on one of these chairs if she had been. She would generate a lot of excitement. People love her. People love the Wanda character. So for her name to not be on one of these chairs, I don't think that that's a misdirection. I think she's probably winding down her involvement a little bit with Marvel, because she's said as much. In the last few interviews that we've seen with her, and she's got a lot going on right now. She really is shooting a pilot for FX right now that she's going to be in. So, I just have a lot of questions about a lot of these characters, and someone like Tom Holland, it's like, all right, well, he's getting ready to shoot Spider-Man 4, and that's in, he's doing that. He's doing the Odyssey. We know Spider-Man 4 is going to come out between Avengers Doomsday and Avengers Secret Wars, so we're going to check in with that character. But like, are we going to need to check in with him in Doomsday 2? Like, maybe not if we're going to see him in a movie just a few months later. So, I think there's still a lot of questions to answer here.
Mm-hmm. I hear you on the Elizabeth Olsen points, but I never really believed her based on the quotes that I read. And after all of these announcements, I believe her even less so, because you look at Magneto, the inclusion of so many of these Fox X-Men, like, you have to have Scarlet Witch be a part of the proceedings, whether it's the no more mutants or the inverse of that, like, let's bring mutants into the fold here. Like, I don't see any other way. And maybe she's not a focal figure like you're saying there. I remember some comments from Benedict Cumberbatch again, like around like Infinity War and Endgame. He was like largely not present during the filming of Infinity War. Like, they had his stunt double there, his like stand-in, and he had to come in and do pickups to like, replace his face. A lot of it, like, if you pay attention, there's a lot of scenes it's just the back of Doctor Strange's head. So they could do the same thing with Scarlet Witch here pretty easily. And on the subject of, the X-Men and how many X-Men are included here, I recall back at San Diego Comic-Con, there was a lot of speculation, a lot of fervor right before we got the confirmation about Doomsday. People were thinking Avengers versus X-Men. So I think that is clearly a possibility and clearly at play here. But what is the story at large here? And are we going to see Doctor Doom be the manipulator or the architect of destruction that sometimes he is, and maybe he's the one that's pitting the Avengers and X-Men against each other? It's like, which universe is going to survive this incursion? Like, fight for it.
Yeah. It would be so wild if that's really what it is. And it's the X-Men universe is very beloved in many ways, but it's also feels like its time has passed. So it feels weird to pit them against each other, like as universes. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It's very strange. Very strange idea, and very meta too. To like have your two universes that are literal not only universes in the canon, but also like film universes, film franchises, and have them go against each other. We've talked about in the past doing like if they ever did like a Marvel versus DC type of movie. If we ever get to that point of crossover where like, where do we go from here? What's the undiscovered country? And then they do something like that. Yeah, give it time. Exactly. All things will happen eventually. But yeah, I was that surprised me a lot. The number of original 2000s X-Men that are in this. We had Kelsey Grammer, Patrick Stewart, Ian McKellen, Alan Cumming, Rebecca Romaine, James Marsden, and Channing Tatum doesn't really count, but he's like, what was it? Honorable mention.
I'm about to make a name for myself here today.
I really can't believe I can't believe his name's on a chair. It's like, what was it? I think it's you, Jay, who said, if Wanda's name wasn't here, or if Elizabeth Olsen, she's probably not a main character. But it's like, does that mean that Channing Tatum is going to be a main character?
Well, I think that's the misdirect. I think it's like, here's all the names. You don't know how much they're going to be in the film or not. Like, we know that Monica is with those X-Men or some faction of those X-Men. These could even be the same looking X-Men in a different universe. That's what they very well could be doing, because
yes, 100%.
That is kind of what we think happened at the end of the Marvels with Monica.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert, I guess. Sorry, my bad, whatever.
Yeah, it's like 2 years
old. The movie's been out for a while now. So, it's like, it could be that, because the X-Men thing kind of does give me pause, because it's like they wanted the Deadpool Wolverine thing to be the farewell for the Foxmen, and so it's like, are they doing that again, or are we doing them but not them, which is what I would personally prefer.
Yeah, and this has got to be a swan song for the X-Men, the Fox X-Men, I would think. I mean, at this point, like, bringing all these characters back is a nod, and it's a way to connect. I mean, people who watched the whole Foxverse are probably the same. There's a lot of crossover between people who watched the whole MCU. So I think this has got to be the last time, I would imagine, that we see these particular actors. I mean, Ian McKellen and Sir Patrick Stewart, like, when are these guys going to rest? I mean, it's crazy.
They offered Hugh Jackman till he's 90. I better get till I'm 90.
But it does raise questions for me about, like, we know that the X-Men are on the table. We know that there's a film in the works about the X-Men. We know it already has a writer. It's being fast-tracked. So there is a future for X-Men characters, but I don't think it's controversial at all to say it's probably not going to be these actors portraying those characters. So I got to wonder how are we ultimately, I mean, we're talking about Secret Wars, which is years away, but how are we ultimately going to leave those characters in a place where the mantles or the actual characters themselves or whatever can be taken up by new people to carry those characters into the next thing? I mean, we've talked about before Secret Wars, like, what is it going to serve as? Is it going to serve as a reboot in some form or fashion, or is it going to be some sort of a soft reboot? And I've got a lot of those questions after seeing, like, well, yeah, there's going to be X-Men in it, but they're all the old guys. It's like, okay, well, that signals to me that maybe there is a little bit of reboot talk going on with Secret Wars, and that maybe we have a future with the X-Men, but it's probably post Secret Wars that we see new people portraying these characters. But how are we going to get there, I guess, is a lot of questions. There's a lot of questions there.
I've liked the Wanda theory for a long time. In comics, she does no more mutants. It would be really nice to be like, for the universes to touch her, to interact with all this. Maybe she learns about a different version of herself that had a different family, you know. She's been seeking family since she lost her children, and it's like what if she knew in this other universe there was this whole mutant family that you know, she got to know and love, and then like she's able to manifest them in our universe, and then it's like a whole new crew of different X-Men, but it still fits into the 616 well enough to maintain continuity or whatever. All right, well, we could go on, and you can find that full list everywhere, but basically it's just a big list. You know who's markedly absent, in my opinion? Chris Evans.
Yeah.
He's showing up. He's showing up, somewhere. He'll show up somewhere.
For sure.
Haley Atwell. All those ones that were already, like, they're going to do it.
I think there's a lot more still to come.
For sure.
About this. I think there's a lot of cast members still to come for this movie and Secret Wars and the whole thing. Which, I mean, they're shooting back to back. It's going to be a part 1, part 2 story. We can kind of consider them the same story. And yeah, I think we're just at the tip of the iceberg with the characters that we'll see in this.
Yep, absolutely.
And of all the Thunderbolts they include, Taskmaster weirdly absent.
That is
weird.
weird.
That is, yeah.
Shocking.
That is so weird.
The worst kept secret in Marvel history. When it happens in the theater, I'm just going to be like, yeah, of course.
If you got to go to the bathroom, that's the time to do it. Yeah.
Aw.
Sorry.
Terrible.
I like Taskmaster.
Early RIP.
All right, well, we went crazy long on that Marvel story, so we're going to, before we do a rest for our feature stories this week, we'll be right back. Welcome back to Multiverse News. Let's turn to that second story for this week. Amy Pascal and David Heyman have officially been named as producers on the next James Bond film, according to a Variety article from Tuesday. Pascal is known for her work at Sony and continues to work with Phil Lord and Christopher Miller on different projects such as Spider-Man Noir. Heyman's name ought to be familiar to Harry Potter fans, as he produced all 8 of the original films, and he also is in pre-production on the new series. Both Hollywood executives will produce Bond under their own named production companies and say they are working closely with longtime 007 studio heads Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson. How shaken is our martini with this interesting news?
The biggest thing that gave me pause was Amy Pascal's name. Is she still at Sony? I wanted to look, and
she's not with Sony Pictures anymore, I don't think.
Okay, that's what I thought. So yeah, you know, Amy Pascal's track record at Sony it's spotty. It's got some real big hits, of course. We've got the Spider-Verse movies. We've got Tom not Hiddleston's Spider-Man, the other one, and then we've got the rest of the Sonyverse, all done under her wing. And the 007 franchise is so beloved to me that I have a lot of concerns about her having any kind of creativity and creative control with a new film. David Heyman kind of balances that out. Like, those original Harry Potter movies, for all of their not exactly following the books stuff, were good. They were always good. They were always solid. As Harry Potter fans, we loved them. And, you know, he's also doing the series. So it's kind of like, okay, you have that continuity there. That makes me more interested in that series. But I just wonder, why Amy Pascal? So is it just because of her box office track record? Like, if you look it all up, of course it's going to look pretty good because she's got a lot of films that did rake in a lot of money because she had the Spider-Man character in her house. Like, of course you're going to make money with Spider-Man. But then there's just all those misses with the villain movies. Like, it just really concerns me. James Bond is such a storied character. It's got such an aesthetic. It's got such a certain feel. The Bond tribute at the Oscars I thought was terrible. I thought it was going to be really cool, and it sucked, in my opinion. And so I'm like, great, is this an omen of things to come? And then you tell me Amy Pascal is helping out, and I'm like, oh no, I don't know about this. So yeah, very mixed feelings at this time. A lot will matter who they cast as Bond. Clearly they're doing a film, not a series, at least to start with, so that's interesting news as well. We weren't really sure which way they were going to go. There's just too many unknowns still for me to feel like, this is great, this is great.
So picture this. Amy Pascal walks into the room and she's like, listen, I ran Sony. And they're like, whoa, Sony, like you made a lot of money, right? And she's like, yeah. She's like, we set up our universe like this. We got a bunch of movies about James Bond that do really well, but then we'll also create a bunch of spin-off movies about James Bond villains with no James Bond in them. What do you think? What do you think?
Thanks, I hate it.
I could totally see some studio heads going for that, though. You know, like that seems like an absolute.
They'll all be anti-heroes. They think they're the hero, but they're really the villain.
Remember Jaws? We're gonna give him a show. No.
Well, with a deep character like Jaws, you could pull it off, probably.
Yeah. We'll find that depth.
Yeah.
No, you won't.
Yeah, I have a pretty similar reaction to what's been said so far. I'd say I'm stirred, but not shaken. And this is totally a mixed bag. I kind of had the verbatim reaction to you, Haley. It was like, Amy Pascal. Like, okay, we got David Heyman. At least he's lending some kind of pedigree and some tenure here. And Bond is a very British franchise, and I think you can say the same thing about Harry Potter. So I think that should do a little bit to assuage some of the concerns and the fears here. But I kind of had to check myself. I was like, why am I so against Amy Pascal? And certainly the association with Sony is a big factor. But I always kind of lump her in with Avi Arad. Whenever I hear the name Avi Arad or Amy Pascal, it's kind of like, don't let those people, touch the creative stuff. All they want to do is merchandise and make money, and they don't know how to do it that well. But I had to go back and do a little research. Apparently, Amy Pascal does something right. And when I looked at her producing credits, she's only started producing movies in 2016. And she's a producer on Venom and all of the Venom films, but she's actually not involved with the other Sonyverse movies, which I found surprising. So I think that does, speak to some cunning or ability that she has to kind of, read the tea leaves and kind of know what's going to be successful, or maybe she's just an opportunist and she's gotten very fortunate with what she's been able to jump on versus not. But all that being said, she's still not a name that gives me a bunch of confidence, but I think I've learned a little bit of a lesson on Amy Pascal. It's like, okay, I'm not going to hold you up at the same esteem that I do some of my other favorite producers and executives, but maybe I've been a little harsh on Amy Pascal. We'll see.
I mean, she was still the executive at the studio that made those movies. Prove me wrong. I'm happy to be proven wrong.
We'll find out.
Yeah, I don't have really much to take on this, except I just knew that Haley would have a lot to say about anybody taking this role, because this role has been something that's been somewhat interesting in Hollywood, and taken the James Bond and sort of separated it from other types of franchises. And yeah, it's not protected anymore. And these names give me not that I think these names are terrible, but just they are the types of names that was going to franchise the hell out of James Bond. We're going to be getting James Bond everything. We're going to be getting a 006 movie and a 005 movie. We're going to get it all, man. A big connected universe of 00s. And I mean, I'm not here for it. It could be good. Could be cool. I love a franchise.
I think they have the most unenviable task of finding the new Bond, because that's a decision that you never please anybody with until they're actually on the screen, and then people are like, oh, actually, that was a good idea.
Yeah, for sure.
I can't find any evidence that Amy Pascal was a producer on any of those other Sony movies that we've been talking about, but it is noteworthy that she is still going to be a producer on the upcoming Spider-Man 4, as well as Beyond the Spider-Verse. So I don't know exactly what her relationship with Sony is at this point, but I know they parted ways at some point, like 3 or 4 years ago, and that's why Pascal Pictures became such a thing. But I'll have to do some more research and get back to you.
All right. Well, moving on to our next story this week. Though it took first place this weekend, the $43 million domestic opening of Disney's live-action remake of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs is a box office failure, along with dismal revenue for the controversy-embroiled film. It has received an overall cinema score of B+, something no Disney live-action remake has done yet. Robert De Niro's Alto Knights also debuted to disappointing figures, and Jonathan Majors-led Magazine Dreams only cracked $700,000 in its limited release. Has spring become the new dump season for movies?
I don't know if we're quite there yet. I don't know if spring is going to be a dump month, but Snow White's not surprising. I did go see Snow White. It's not great, but its failure is not surprising to anybody here, right? So I want to focus in on Alto Knights, and that was what was surprising to me. I think the marketing for Alto Knights was non-existent. I remember going to the theater to see The Monkey with my buddy and making note of the poster because I was like, Alto Knights with Robert De Niro? How do I not know about this? Like, I do a podcast about movie news. How do I not know that this movie is on the way? So don't know what they were expecting there. Maybe it's just me and my bubble. I didn't get exposed to any of that, but I find it pretty hard to believe. Now, I was tempted to go see Magazine Dreams, but it actually ended up being one of those scenarios where I kind of had to, pick and choose what I'm going to see here, and I actually opted to go see Death of a Unicorn instead. So that one, it's not going to be a part of the reporting here because I got to see it early. It was kind of an early fan screening there, but I do recommend it. Especially, we were just talking about Paul Rudd a little earlier here. I think it's a great vehicle for him, and it does the A24 thing where it is able to deliver some chills and thrills, but nothing over the top. I'd actually qualify it as more of like a dark comedy there at the end. Now, to bring it back to Snow White, like I said, I don't think the results here are surprising to anybody, but on the note of surprising again, my showing was pretty empty, but that didn't stop from someone clapping at the end of the movie, which I was very surprised about. It was definitely a solo clap that died very quickly when he realized no one else would be joining in. But, last thing I'll say about Snow White is it's unfortunate to say, but I think, Rachel Zegler had a lot of haters and people that weren't very happy with her about some of her comments, not only her political comments, but just about Snow White and the source material. And unfortunately, I think Gal Gadot comes away looking a lot worse in terms of just the performance. The voice is not great. Some of the musical numbers are really, really laughable when they're not intended to be. So, it's not the worst of the Disney remakes. It at least entertained me by doing something different, and I bought into the dwarves relatively quickly. There was a little bit of cognitive dissonance initially, but I got through the uncanny valley unscathed.
As though I walked through the uncanny valley of death, I shall fear no CGI creatures.
I keep wondering, what went wrong with a remake of Snow White, because it should be, for all intents and purposes, right up there with the live-action remake of Little Mermaid, which did pretty well in terms of financial success and streaming numbers when it finally hit Disney+. And if you're going to make a remake of Snow White, it should get the same crowd. It should kind of draw in the same people who were excited to go to the theater to see that. But this really was a bomb. I mean, it's gonna drop hard in its next weekend too. It's gonna tank in its next weekend. And the fact that the budget was really high, the budget was north of $200 million, well north of $200 million. Then there was the marketing costs. I mean, this movie will lose money. It will not break even. And when you're trying to make the list of, all right, well, what went wrong? Well, the list is just pretty long. We've talked about it over the last year or so. The CGI dwarves controversy, and then you had people coming out like Peter Dinklage, for example, was like, why can't you just cast people that look like me? And so that created a whole conversation. Then you had
wasn't that the opposite?
I think he said both in that same conversation. I think he said,
from what I understand, he came out and said that it was casting dwarves as these dwarves was weird and almost like calling them fantasy creatures, but then a bunch of other actual, little people were like, no, like you're taking jobs away from us. Like you're getting all these jobs, but we're not getting jobs. Is the way I remember that.
I think he was a little bit more down the middle than that. I don't think he was totally like on that side, but that whole thing, right? About that whole conversation, that was part of it. Again, that's something you can get past, like especially because that was like the earliest controversy it had. Like that was way back.
Right.
Well, then it got delayed, and then it had to move back, and then you had the political comments from Rachel Zegler, and then you had the tension between Gal Gadot and Rachel Zegler, and you had the Israel-Palestine conflict remarks from both of them on opposite sides of the fence, and then you had just all of that boiled into something huge. Like if you turned on like Fox News right now, I guarantee you it would be like, Snow White bombs at the box office. Isn't this awesome? We love watching woke Disney go up in flames. Like so it's like when you get into those corners of crosshairs in our culture, it just like there is a piling on. So it's not that that particular group totally killed Snow White, but it was just another knife in the back. It was like you had all of this stuff going on at the same time. And then at the end of the day, like I think just people were kind of turned off by the fact that, you had all this stuff happening around it, but then it was so delayed. So it was like you marketed it and then you took it off the table for months and months and months, and then you put it back on the table, hoping to avoid some of the controversy. Well, then people aren't just going to spontaneously all of a sudden be ready for it. Then they're just going to be, kind of already made up their mind about it. So it's all of these things. It's like it's the perfect storm of what could go wrong for a big tentpole Disney remake type thing. And I don't think all of the Disney remakes suffer the same fate because they maybe have one of the controversies or two of the controversies. Like if we remember back in the day when we talked about the Little Mermaid remake, we talked about, well, there's some corners of people who are not happy with the race of the character, and that could cause, but then it ended up doing really well. Like it ended up doing fine, and it was like not a big deal, and it was just, it wasn't even a controversy because you just moved past it. And it's like, whatever, people saw it. But this one got bogged down in all of that, and it just couldn't escape it. And they turned off the faucet on marketing pretty early. Like, I don't know if you guys noticed, like there was not a lot of marketing. There's commercials and stuff, but like Zegler did no press, Gal Gadot did no press. Like none of these people went out to promote the thing. They kind of just left it to die. I mean, we talked about the red carpet event, just photographers, that's it. Like nobody can come to the red carpet event. It's just, that tells you everything you need to know about how they felt like it was going to do. B+ cinema score, I mean, that tells you, okay, maybe some people will see it, but you expect an A at least if you're a Disney live action remake of a 100-year-old princess character. Like you expect an A at least. So B+ is still not great.
I wonder if the 100-year-old part is part of the problem too, because most of the live action remakes have been ones that like right now the people who are parents grew up on those movies coming out. Lion King. I'm trying to remember if there have been. What's the furthest back reaching? I guess Jungle Book reaches back a little further.
Jungle Book was like early 70s. Yeah.
But even still, I feel like I grew up everywhere. Jungle Book was everywhere when I was growing up, even though it was, 15 years before my time or whatever. I never saw Snow White as a kid, and I was an 80s kid and like just never came across. So I'm wondering if it's just like a little more dated so that even people that grew up in our generation, it's not as close to their time, so they're not dying to take their kids to see the remake to experience something because it's not something obviously it has its fans. It is just an older generation's movie. So I wonder if that might also impact these box office takes.
I saw that take earlier today, and I thought, oh, maybe. I personally think the live action remakes do best when they stick close to the story of the animated film. I think when you really start to deviate, I don't like them as much. I'll just say it that way. Like the Aladdin one, it gets panned, but I think it's one of my favorite ones because it's pretty beat for beat the animated movie, and that's one I grew up loving because I was of that age. And so maybe too far removed from, and I know they wanted to update it and I understand why and all of that, but they were doing that with all the other ones too. It was just everything was against it. But you know what's the saddest thing about Snow White? Like, this is the movie Walt Disney won an Oscar for. And now it's like just being dragged through the mud. And I think they even had 7 little mini Oscars, if I'm remembering correctly, back when they did. Like, I think that's real. I remember seeing that before. And yeah, it's just a bummer. But these other films, Scotty, Alto Nights, I only saw a trailer when I went to see Black Bag, and I was like,
okay,
that looks like a movie I've seen 100 million times. Like, I'm not really interested in seeing it. You know what I mean? And it was like, okay. And then I didn't want to see.
Okay, maybe I did see the trailer then.
You might have, but obviously it wasn't memorable. It's like, and then Magazine Dreams, you know, controversy with that as well. And it got dumped by its original studio. And was it Warner Brothers that picked it up? Or
I think it was Briarcliff, which has kind of become known as like kind of like Catch Up. They're kind of come in and rescue these films.
So they're just releasing it almost to release it. So yeah, it's just not it. I wonder if Snow White would have done better in the summer, maybe. Doesn't matter now.
Anything but what happened.
Yeah.
Any other time.
All right, moving on to our next story. Apple's streaming service had a huge win after finishing the second season of Severance last week, when the show became the most streamed series on Apple TV Plus, surpassing Ted Lasso. Severance hit the Nielsen streaming report for 5 consecutive weeks, clocking in at 681 million minutes viewed. Apple CEO Tim Cook quickly gave the show the green light for a 3rd season last Friday morning. On the heels of this news, it may be surprising or not to hear that Apple loses $1 billion a year on the streaming service and only has 45 million subscribers. But based on what the tech giant has said in the past, this may not matter. What say we about the financial calamity tied to such creative ascendancy?
Yeah, I mean, Severance Season 3 seems like the biggest no-brainer in history that you would renew that. And then we also know that Apple confirmed Ted Lasso Season 4 last week, and that makes total sense because if you're going to grow a streaming service, that's what you need. Apple has put out a lot of really good one-shot series, which are good. I'm thinking about Lessons in Chemistry. I'm thinking about the one that Elizabeth Olsen did with Jesse Plemons. I forget what it's called, but it was like a murder kind of show. It was really good as well. Like there's a lot of those like limited series on Apple TV Plus that are really good. Presumed Innocent is another good one with Jake Gyllenhaal, but those don't keep the subscribers. And while they're good, you have the problem with a limited series is that it is limited. It only lasts for 5 or 6 episodes and then it goes by the wayside and there's no reason to keep subscribing. So to bring in a show like Severance, like Ted Lasso, that you're saying these are popular shows, people love them, and now we're going to keep making more seasons of them. That's how you begin to gain a little bit of traction. And I will say, just kind of looking at it from the vantage point of the $1 billion, Apple as a company itself, you have to remember the perspective here. Apple made last year in 2024 $391 billion as a company. You know, their bread and butter is not streaming. And so I saw some people putting this out there as like a dunk on Apple, like, you know, oh, they're losing $1 billion. It's like, you have to understand, like, bottom line wise, this is a long game investment for Apple. You will lose money on a streaming service at the beginning. Netflix lost money for years before it finally became profitable, and it only really started becoming profitable like it is today because they started cracking down on password sharing and things like that. It was still struggling big time, just more recently than you think as a company, even though it's been around as the head of basically the streaming world for the last, you know, however long we've been streaming things on our TV. And so the idea that you're just going to start a streaming service and it's going to take off and make you just hand over fist money, you got to remember Apple TV Plus, still one of the lowest cost to sign up of the streaming services as well, while Netflix is getting close to, what is it now, $13, $14 a month or something like that at this point? I mean, it's probably even more than that.
All the bells and whistles, it's closer to $20 these days.
Yeah, and Apple TV Plus has still got a pretty low barrier to entry compared to that. So I think you have to keep that in mind. Now, I do think this means a couple things. I think it means that we will see more of the Severance and Ted Lasso treatment. We'll see more shows getting 2nd and 3rd seasons on Apple TV Plus, and we will see announcements of shows that we know will continue. And then I think it also means that low price hike that I just mentioned will probably go up a little bit over the next couple years to try to close that gap. But yeah, the $1 billion thing, it again, because it's from Apple, it's it doesn't surprise me on one end, but it also doesn't alarm me in any way whatsoever when I'm looking at the newness of Apple TV Plus, the really great content that they're making. And again, you just have to remember a lot of people have a lot of streaming services. Getting them to sign up for a new one is really hard now because they have Netflix and Max and Prime Video and all of these streaming services. It's hard to get them to do the next one, to be like, well, come over to Apple. But I think especially with Severance, I mean, you guys all saw it too, like what Severance did and got the conversation going around Severance. Those are the kind of wins that are going to really push that streaming service to the next level.
I think we've talked about before that Apple has basically said, this is like an advertising opportunity for us. That's what we're treating our streaming service as. That's why we let Martin Scorsese make a 3.5-hour movie of Killers of the Flower Moon. You know, like, they're just like, oh, just throw some money. It's chump change, that $1 billion. Like, whatever. We're good. We're good. Which is wild to think about, but not when you think about the scale of Apple. And so I think it's interesting that their subscriber number is so low, but I saw a lot of post-Severance reactions being like, okay, thanks, see ya, Apple, I'll sign back up when season 3 is on. Like, it's really interesting, the psychology of specifically the Apple streaming service versus everybody else because it's so new, like you said, Jay. And so, yeah, I've started watching more and more things on it now that I'm there. And of course, we only signed up for it when we got a new device in the house, and it was like, here's your 3 months free. And that's how they sucked us in, and damn it, it worked. But like, even their films, like The Gorge that Scott Derrickson did, is it amazing? No. Is it a fun movie to watch? Yeah. And is it quality enough for me to have wanted to without knowing what it was about, really? Sure. So I think they're fine. And I think they're fine with being in the zeitgeist in the way that they are in a different way than with their products. They're in the zeitgeist with their entertainment.
Do you think when Tim Cook is having a performance review with the executive leadership, he prepares lunch menus to pass out?
Yeah. He might run away real fast, too.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. I don't have too much more to add. I think you guys have been pretty comprehensive in the pros and cons, and I just come away like, you know, people smarter than me say you got to spend money to make money, and that's kind of the consensus that I've seen around this. They're taking the time and using the resources to build a really stellar catalog, and that's going to eventually be what gets people to stay. So Haley, to your point, I'm right there with you. It's started off with one show here or there, but more and more it's an app that I frequent more and more, and has increased in value. And I'm not one of those people. I don't think I'm going to say, you know, kick him to the curb. I want to support him, and, you know, at $10 a month, I'm willing to do that at this point. Now, if down the road, if we have to tighten the leash, you know, there may be another conversation to have, because there's a lot of streaming services to keep up with these days, and, you know, this wallet only goes so far. So,
yeah, I think it's interesting because I feel like a lot of people have Netflix and Hulu because they were like early, and now we're just used to them. But when we add one, we start being like, well, it's kind of like first one in, last one, or first one in, first one out sort of thing, you know, where you're like, oh, well, I just added this one to watch the show and I'll lose it. But not thinking, I mean, honestly, I probably watch more on Apple than I watch on Netflix, but I still keep both. But I feel like Netflix, you almost have to have it because there's every once in a while something really, you know, some really great and important show that I want to watch. But it's becoming more and more rare with Netflix, I feel like.
There's a weird psychology around it. Like,
Oh, yeah,
I was an
totally.
early adopter of this, so I'm going. Netflix is like the biggest one because we had Netflix. All of us had it when you were getting DVDs in the mail, which was, you know, like the best thing ever back in the day. You know, like 15 years ago, and we can't get rid of it because I'm like, well, I watched this one thing on it over and over again. Like it's the place where I rewatch Gilmore Girls. You know, like whatever the stupid thing is that you rewatch, which that's mine for Netflix. But then like now when I go to watch a new show, if I'm in the mood to watch something new, I'm like, you know what? I haven't watched anything on Max for a while. What's on Max? Or I haven't paid any attention to Peacock. I'm going to go see what's on Peacock. And I feel like that's happening, which is weird. That's a weird way to have to make television.
You just reminded me. I still have Peacock. I still have not canceled it. I bought it. I bought it back. I wanted to watch the Packers and the Eagles season opener. It was in Brazil.
Now you're
It was an
stuck.
international game. I could only watch it on Peacock, and so I signed up for Peacock, and I didn't cancel it. And that was in
The streaming home of
September.
Wicked, Jay. Come on.
I haven't watched a single. I've been sending NBC $10 or whatever every month
And they
since
appreciate it.
September, and I haven't watched shit on that thing.
I watched Long Bright River on Peacock, and it was pretty good. But that was why I went to it, because I was like, I haven't watched anything on Peacock in a while, and I was like, oh yeah, Long Bright River. I've been seeing that advertised. I'll watch that.
All right. Well, that's our main stories for today. We got a great lightning round tonight. We got coming up. We have Coco 2 will release in theaters, and the Jason Bourne franchise is looking for a new home. Only Murders in the Building has some new casting, and new Star Wars comics, plus a lot more. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Multiverse News. Thanks for joining us tonight, guys. We do always like to tell you about here after the ad break. We have a Patreon. Somebody want to tell them about the Patreon? Somebody jump in.
It's patreon.com/multiverse newscast, and it's $4 a month, which is basically like $1 an episode. And it comes with benefits. Like, for example, you get to watch the live stream that you don't get to watch if you're not watching live on YouTube. You get extra episodes that we put out just for you. You get to support our show, which obviously is the main reason to do it. But we'll also, if this is just transactional to you, we'll also send you a sticker in the mail that says Multiverse News, and it's got our logo, and you'll just get it just for being a patron. So there's one on the screen right now. Haley's got it. So it could be yours if you want to come over to patreon.com/multiverse newscast.
Yeah, absolutely. So please do that. Check out Multiverse News on the Patreon. So we also want to shout out Bree Whedon, our patron of the week, that we're going to try to shout out one of you patrons every week. So thank you, Bree, and to all of the other patrons. Thank y'all so much. But this week, Bree, you rock.
Thank you for being a patron.
All right. Well, our Spotify poll this week was, should the MCU reboot? 3.4% of you said hard reboot. Interesting.
I love that. They're just like, I'm done. I'm done.
Yeah.
Start it over.
Yeah.
Those are sure people.
Can it all.
45.8% of you said no reboot, and 50.8% barely squeaking out the win says soft reboot.
Yeah, we just like riding the fence here too. It's like, yeah, it's a soft reboot. Whatever that
Don't
means.
kill my MCU.
Yeah. Like I think it's what we're heading towards. I feel like that answer and that majority is just based on like resignation that's where we're going. You know what I mean? Like we know we're getting it with Secret Wars. Some sort of soft reboot is happening. Some sort of combination of universes or creation of new universes or something. So it'll be fun. All right, let's get into our lightning round. This is where I'm going to read a story, and then we are going to shout out our names to claim that story, and then one person will comment on each story, except once per lightning round, you get a rebuttal. So feel free to grab a rebuttal if you hear something you just cannot not speak on. Speaking at Disney's annual shareholder meeting, Bob Iger confirmed that Pixar is developing a sequel film to Coco with a targeted theatrical release date sometime in 2029. The sequel will bring back members of the creative team from the original film.
Jay,
Scotty?
I think this... Oh, sorry. I was just going to say that I
Don't
think
say
that,
sorry, you won.
You
yeah,
won.
You're right.
Yeah,
you're right.
claim
You're
it.
right. I know. I take it back. Retract. I think Coco is one of the best Pixar movies. How many have there been now? Like 26 or 27, something like that, probably at this point. I think it's definitely one of the top 5 ones. I think like just the song numbers in it are really good. Like some of the best. So not even just Pixar, like some of the best like Disney stuff. Like in general, like the song numbers are great, and then just the animation's beautiful, the voice acting's great, and the cultural connections that it has are so strong to where I watch it semi regularly because I have kids and they want to rewatch stuff a lot. And I find stuff in it all the time that I'm like, yeah, like that. I missed that the first time. That's such a good little detail or whatever. So I think this is a good call. I think it's a tremendously popular movie, and I think like 2029 or whatever that you said as a date to do it, that makes sense. That's whenever people who are younger are going to start getting kind of the Toy Story effect. They're going to kind of be getting up there a little bit and wanting to check in on the story. Plenty of room for a sequel too, with how the first one ended.
Yeah.
Rebuttal just to say, I'm in love with the Coco. But I agree with everything that was brought up. I think it's one of my favorite Pixar films, and the memory that I hold with it is like it was one of the first times in like since I was an adult going to the movie theater that like I ugly cried in the theater. Like this thing just
I think I cried like 3 times during Coco.
Yeah.
I'm not even kidding. Like there's
sad.
like at least 2 or 3 moments that they just get you like right in the heart.
Yeah, so I kind of like explored that and thought about it because I also noted another movie that I've, admitted on air to crying over is Godzilla -1. And the through line between the two is like the only thing I can kind of, extrapolate here is that it's about relationships between fathers and daughters and kind of, what could be. And I'm neither a father nor a daughter, so I don't know why those particular stories get me, but they get me for some reason. So the other thing I want to bring up is the near 10-year gap, because if I'm not mistaken, the original came out in 2016. Oh, no, it's well over 10 years. What am I thinking here? So like almost 13 years later that we're talking about here. I wonder if they're going to acknowledge that with the character, if we're going to see an older
Miguel,
I think the character's name was, if we're going to see an older version of him, because like you said, Jay, the story is so steeped in the culture and the generational value that is there. It's all about remembering your ancestors. So I have to imagine and kind of hope that that'll be a through line as well.
WME is shopping the rights to the Jason Bourne franchise as well as the full library of Robert Ludlum properties to potential suitors since the rights have officially expired at Universal. Skydance, Apple, and Netflix are all said to have met with the estate for the rights. Universal, too, could potentially win the rights back if it made an attractive bid.
Haley, Amazon's gonna buy it.
We got James
And ruin
Bond,
it
and we
somehow.
got Jason Bourne.
And we got
Team up
Reacher, and we
movie.
got.
Oh, yeah.
We're gonna
Like,
put
we
them
got the
together.
corner. No, I don't know.
It's Bond/Bourne coming this fall.
Matt Damon is actually James Bond. Kill me now. I don't know. The Jason Bourne franchise isn't one that I watch as much as others, but I know it's really popular. It just seems like it's kind of tapered off, and so I wonder if a new distributor could give it some new life or something. But then to get Robert Ludlum's entire like fictional catalog would be a lot more properties. So maybe it's the end of Bourne as we know it. I don't know.
Sherman Augustus has joined the cast of HBO's Lanterns in a recurring role. He will play Jon Stewart's father, John Sr. J. Alphonse Nicholson was cast last week in the series and will play a younger version of John Sr.
Scotty, not a lot to go off of here. I'm not super familiar with either of the performers here, but my main takeaway is that this just kind of gives evidence to how much of a focus Jon Stewart is going to be. We're going to be spending time with his father, and not just his father, but younger versions of his father. So we're going to get some backstory there. And with the casting that we got last week with Jason Ritter, I wonder if we're probably going to be seeing the evolution of like a conflict between certain members of this community, and probably specifically like 2 families that have probably been in conflict for generations. So always good to get a little bit more information. We'll look forward to this thing when it comes out.
Cool. Agency Verve, which has represented the rights for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise since 2017, is reportedly looking to sell the rights to revive the franchise. A rumored interested party, according to Deadline, is filmmaker J.T. Molnar and producer Roy Lee. And if they get a script together, word is that Glenn Powell would like to read it. A24, Lionsgate, and others are reportedly expressing interest in that vision. Molnar and Lee are currently coming off the heels of the cult hit Strange Darling.
Scotty, you look at all the players that are in the mix here, and it makes sense. As a horror fan, I have a certain appreciation for Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but it's never been one that I've held like on the Mount Rushmore, like top 5 horror franchises for me specifically. Now, the one element here that normally I would be over the moon about, but in this instance, I'm kind of like, I don't know if I like that for him, is Glenn Powell. Now, he is a proud Texas boy. A lot of his films are set in Texas. He makes a point to, mention that. So, he could potentially be a good fit. But I think about the directors here, and I did see Strange Darling, and I liked it, but I thought it felt a little derivative of like Tarantino and stuff like that. But certainly there were definitely some elements of their filmmaking that I think would really lend themselves to like an indie horror, not unlike something from A24. So it could be a nice revamping for the franchise and get somebody like me that's, maybe held it at arm's length and could be the breath of fresh air that it needs.
Two-time Oscar winner Christoph Waltz and two-time Oscar winner Renee Zellweger have joined Only Murders in the Building for season 5.
Scotty, I'm reminded that I need to go back and finish season 4. Love the show, but it's just kind of gotten away from me. But two obviously very talented people there. Welcome additions.
Mm-hmm. That show gets great cast.
Oh, yeah.
Euphoria actor Austin Abrams has emerged as the choice to star in Sony Pictures and Zach Kreger's reboot of horror action movie Resident Evil.
Scotty, calling it now, he's going to be Chris Redfield. He's a dead ringer for Chris Redfield, who was the main character in the first game, but he's never gotten as much love in the movies. He showed up in the movies, but he's never been as much of a main character. So, yeah, say hello to your Chris Redfield and Austin Abrams.
Nice. Fan favorite Star Wars comics character Dr. Aphra returns to the pages in a new series called Dr. Aphra Chaos Agent. The rogue space archaeologist will be seen alongside Luke Skywalker in a new series that starts June 18th.
Haley, the simulation gave this to me because I just listened to the Dr. Aphra audio drama on Audible this week. And then I saw this and I was like, oh, cool. Brian and I actually read the original comics forever ago over on Source Pages. We read the whole omnibus where she first appears. And she's a cool character. She's one that would be very fun to see in live action or even animation sometime in Star Wars. She partners with Darth Vader and works for him, and she's got these murder droids that are flippin' hilarious and amazing and want to murder all humans. So she's very popular. She's a very popular character, and I'm glad they're resurfacing her in comics, and I hope we see her on the screen.
I just got to chime in to say, you clearly said audio drama, but for some reason I heard audio trauma. I was like, whoa, is that like a new genre we're doing here?
There is trauma involved.
British actor and comedian Nick Frost has been cast as Hagrid in the upcoming Harry Potter series. Frost can be seen as a frequent collaborator with fellow actor Simon Pegg in Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz, and is also in the live-action remake of How to Train Your Dragon. Matt, this is great. This is great casting, in my opinion. I think he's a great fit, and it makes me more excited for the series because I'm a big fan of Nick Frost. I think he brings a lot of heart to the things he does, and he's really funny, and I think that worked really well for Hagrid. Love it.
I'll tiny about to say that obviously the big casting that we're all waiting on with this thing is the Harry, Ron, and Hermione casting, which I would imagine will be announced together whenever it finally happens, and is probably right around the corner. I mean, we've got Hagrid, we've got Snape, we've got McGonagall, we've got Dumbledore. These are key main characters. So I think we're probably pretty close to that finally big announcement from HBO.
Well, it's interesting because yes, I agree that's going to be obviously incredibly important to the show, but we likely won't know them.
Probably not. No, they'll be young. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe they'll pull someone we do know from something, but some other, so it's been a kid actor in something, but just like the original movies, we didn't know those characters at all, but they cast all these, so the ones I'll be more excited for are the ones we're hearing now, personally. All right, Jack Rayner is set to star in New Line's The Mummy, Lee Cronin's new take on the franchise. Production begins next week in Ireland. The Mummy is set for an April 17th, 2026 release.
Scotty, let's hope this one fares better than the last attempt.
Yeah.
I'll tiny butt to say they're filming in Ireland and not Egypt, and I just think it'd be really funny if they're just trying to they're trying to expand the idea of what a mummy is. It's oh no, there's mummies in all countries,
the
Celtic mummies.
The Celtic
This
mummies.
is about me, mummy. This is about me money at home, don't you know?
Peacock and A24's Friday the 13th prequel series Crystal Lake has cast Linda Cardellini in a lead role as Pamela Voorhees, the mother of franchise face Jason Voorhees. Brad Caleb Kane, coming off creating the prequel series It, Welcome to Derry, will serve as creator, writer, and showrunner.
Scotty, love Linda Cardellini. I never saw this one for her, but it's an interesting choice. So I wonder, what she's going to bring to the table and how willing she's going to be to kind of. She seems like the kind of performer she's aware of. I'll be straight up and say I think she's very attractive, and I think she's aware of how attractive she is. Not to objectify her, but she seems a little more willing to kind of take on roles that are maybe less forgiving or kind of put her in positions where she might be not looked upon as favorably. So Jason Voorhees' mom looms large in the mythology, so it'll be great to see an unhinged Linda Cardellini just embracing that. So look forward to it.
I think we all have that scene from live action Scooby-Doo burned in our brains still. So
we're of an age.
Just had to be there.
I can't make the comments I want to make right now. The amount of Velma things that pop up on the internet when you're just searching around. I'm just saying, you don't even have to be on any suspect website, but the amount of Velma that's out there.
It'll have you saying jinkies. We can move on whenever you're ready.
Yep. Nicholas Hoult has signed on to star in the untitled bank heist thriller that David Leitch is directing for Amazon MGM Studios and Imagine Entertainment.
Jay, yeah, we heard about this whenever it was confirmed, and so now we have our lead man for it, Nicholas Hoult. Getting a lot of work lately.
Tiny butt can't do a bank heist better than Daredevil did. You just can't. It's just not possible. Killed all of their bank heists for me. Okay. Disney has released the final trailer for the second season of Andor ahead of its April 22nd release.
Haley. Yeah, this one's a very different tone than the first one we saw. And in a way, we get a little more extended looks at stuff. It's nothing super serious. I think we get it now, and I'm excited. I'm really excited to binge this because I'm starting my rewatch of season 1 now that I'm caught up on some other stuff, and I'm already preferring the binge model for that show. So I'm really looking forward to how they're doing that this year, even though it was Disney's decision and not Tony Gilroy's. I think it's wise.
I wasn't going to chime in, but I will just because you mentioned the rewatch and the binge model. I have one more episode to go of my rewatch of season 1. I'm really, really enjoying it and super excited for that. But I watched the first 3 episodes together that first night I started my rewatch, and I was really taken with how well they paired together. Like, not to go into like full detail, but like those 3 episodes, like all of that is kind of centered around, a certain planet and before he gets involved with other things that happen. So I'll be curious to see. We know we've heard that we're going to jump across multiple years and that each pairing of 3 episodes is going to be kind of focused on those certain set of years. So it'll be interesting to see as we try to watch it and actively podcast and have content about it too when they're dropping 3 at a time. Normally I'm open to hey, let's play around and experiment, but this one feels like a little bit of a burden. We'll see.
Well, behind the scenes from today, Scotty and Ashley and I will cover this on Always Watching.
Yeah.
And I think that the schedule we're talking about doing will work because I just don't think people will sit down and watch 3 episodes in a row right away on Tuesday night. I just think a lot of people can't do that. And so
True.
I think it'll be fine.
I think when Tony Gilroy was asked and he made the comment about it was Disney's decision, I'm pretty sure he said something about sorry podcasters or something like that.
He did.
Yeah. I think it's going to work out personally. Polly,
it will work out for sure.
I think it could be really good for the show. We've talked a lot about the idea of doing these different release strategies and multiple a week, 3 at a time is a really interesting thing. And each representing a year and being a different kind of arc or whatever. It could be really, really cool. So yeah, I'm excited to be a watcher, and I may end up hopping on one of those with you guys, but I'm not podcasting about it, so I can just be a viewer. Well, guys, that's our show for this week. We will be back with more Multiverse news very, very soon. If you're interested, we are all across the Stranded Panda Network. We're doing a contest to win a PS5. We're giving away a PS5 and 2 Marvel video games with it, the Spider-Man 2 game and the Rise of Hydra game when it comes out. So if you're interested in that, please go to strandedpanda.com/PS5, and there's a whole instructions and links to all the shows that you can review to get. You got to review it and then send us a screenshot of your review or rating on either Apple or Spotify or both. You can get multiple if you want to do both. Just go do those things at all those places. Send us the screenshots and we'll add them all up and we'll put you in the running for a PS5 and some games. That would be awesome. We really appreciate you guys. Anything you guys want to tell the people about?
Well, I just want to remind those listening that if you've only done one show, you can do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 shows on Apple and Spotify. That's 14 entries that you can throw at this thing. Then you can get all 14. So go do that. I mean, if you've only done like the MCU cast and Multiverse News and that's it, and you've only done Apple, like you're leaving 12 more entries on the table.
Lots of entries on the table. And just so you know, like, we're not a very big network. Like we have a reasonable number of listeners, but it's not humongous. And so like, it's not a crazy chance to win the PS5. It's like not terrible odds. If you are one of these people who do all 14, it will possibly it'll put you in the running. Basically, we're not huge. I know we seem like so professional, but we're not a huge network. So we're the reason we give this thing away is because we are trying to grow. So thanks for helping us out with that. And cool. Anybody else got anything they want to talk about?
Check out your music and your Indiegogo thing you're doing, right?
Thank you, Jay Scotty. Yes. I hate telling people to do two different things. So like I didn't want to send them both places. But yeah, I am writing a song a week for Daredevil. Hey, I'm going to put the song for this week at the end of this right here, if that's okay with all you guys.
Do it.
And we've been doing it on the MCU cast, but just so you can hear what I'm doing, when the Daredevil episodes drop, I'm writing a song immediately and trying to get it up on the internet as fast as possible, with as good a production as I can. And then the idea is once they're all done and written, I'm going to make an album and actually hire musicians and do production. And that's what the Indiegogo fundraiser is about. And you can go to strandedpanda.com and it's like the second banner right next to or under the banner for the PS5. You can click on the songwriting one. So appreciate you guys. Thank you, Scoots, for bringing it up. And we'll be back soon. Peace.
You stay classy, Multiverse.
You ain't gotta fight like me, just fight. I know you got knocked down good, but your daddy taught you to get up, right? You ain't gotta fight like me, just fight. I know you had to take a breath, but this game we play is played to the death. I know you wanna trust the system, but what has it done so far? Letting it work as designed? Nah, you gotta raise that bar. All it takes for evil to thrive is the comfortable to avert their eyes. But I've never been one for a soft bed, nice suit. How about you, Red? Ain't gotta fight like me, just fight. I know you got knocked down good, but your daddy taught you to get up, right? Ain't gotta fight like me, just fight. I know you had to take a breath, but this game we play, it's played to the death. We are a symptom of a broken system. We come at night, cause the ones with power refuse to fight. They just want more. They damn the poor. They let violent men consume us all. You hear the cries of the innocent, answer the call. You ain't gotta fight like me, just fight. I know you got knocked down good, but your daddy taught you to get up, right? You ain't gotta fight like me, just fight. I know you had to take a breath, but this game we play is played to the death. there were more like him, there'd be no need for me. But now he's gone, it chewed him up. Let me hear you say his name, a new battle cry for us. You ain't gotta fight like me, just fight. I know you got knocked down good, but your daddy taught you to get up, right? You ain't gotta fight like me, just fight. I know you had to take your breath, but this game we play is played to the death.
Woo! I hope you guys like that one. That one to me was a banger. I just had a fun time making it. It took a little longer than the other weeks so far. So I'm writing a song a week for Daredevil, Born Again, as it comes out. Trying to write a song from the characters' perspectives. So at the end, we'll have an album of every a song that's kind of dedicated to that episode. So this one was a lot of fun. It was too rap rocky to do with an acoustic guitar. I couldn't translate it, so I went ahead and recorded like a full version. But this is one of the ones that I'm most excited to do the full band version for the album, because I am not a guitar player. I am not a bass player. So this was my best representation, but I am so excited to get my band into the studio and record this full quality. It is going to be a banger. And there's just some stuff in there I really love. I love, like, I'm writing from Frank's perspective, and I tried to take on a little bit of a Frank tone of voice / the way he uses speech. I don't know. I would never, in a million years, I could not imagine writing a song with the word daddy in it. But somehow John Bernthal pulls off daddy, could pull off daddy. Like talking about his kids, or talking about, in this case, talking about Daredevil's dad. Like, I just love that, but your daddy taught you to get up, right? Like, your daddy. Like, I can hear Frank saying it. There's just language in this particular song that I don't normally use. How about you, Red? Like, that's that line. And that line I'm doing like a Bernthal impression. I just had so much fun writing it. I haven't written that many sort of like spoken wordy rap type songs, but man, I love doing it. And this one was a lot of fun. So if you like what I'm doing these every week for Daredevil. Please support it. Not that many people have done so yet. We've got some people have come over, and I thank you so much. But if you like what I'm doing and want it to continue and me to be able to do this to its fullest ability, go to the Indiegogo. I'm going to put the link in the description. It's a crowdfunding campaign. I'm asking for money so that I can turn these songs that I'm writing along with every week into a full album with full production and band and musicians, and that all costs money. And so I want to do a really good job, and I want to make a great album for you guys. So check it out in the description of this video. Click on that, and it will take you right there. Thank you so much for everybody who supported it so far, and I would love for more of you to do so. This was a lot of fun. Hope you enjoyed it. Peace. Hey, thanks for listening to Multiverse News, or watching it, or whatever you're doing. Eyeballs or ear holes, whichever thing. We do this show every week, and we appreciate you listening. StrandedPanda.com is where you can find all of our podcasts. And thank you for listening. Check us out wherever you get podcasts. Hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, hit the little bell icon, whatever you have on whatever service you're doing. Rate us, like us. We're really thirsty. That's what I'm saying.